Hello, everybody, and welcome to Teaching Writing in College. And the driving question is always, how can instructors in higher education leverage theory, science, pedagogy, and craft most effectively to help their learners with writing? And so I'm excited about today's episode, 15, Writing is Made of Genres and Genres are Made of ROCSS, Part 1. This is a motto that I like to have in my classes. I like to have students repeat this back to me. I call it our class motto. Writing is made of genres and genres are made of ROCSS. I actually have more than one class motto. There are a few that I keep repeating with students, but I want to do a few different episodes here around this. Part 1 is going to be why genre is so important in teaching writing. It's a central concept, and I have this class motto here just to help students internalize it a bit. Part 2, how I teach genre through ROCSS. I'll talk about that here in just a moment as well. Part 3, how I came up with ROCSS as an acronym in the first place. And then Part 4, if I think of anything else to include, I will go ahead and do so. But I'd like to go ahead and get started on this by maybe talking briefly about why I think genre should be the central concept in most writing courses. That's Part 1. And that's, to me, just, it's about deciding what the curriculum should be, and it's about what's going to help students the most in terms of a writing course and learning transfer. And so that's what this episode is about. It's about why I think genre should be the central concept in most writing courses. And also I'd like to introduce ROCSS to you. It's my shorthand way of talking about genre with my students, and so I draw from the likes of Mikhail Bakhtin, Carolyn Miller, Anis Bawarshi, and Joanne Reif. All of those have been influential in the way that I think about genre, and probably some other ones too, I'm sure. But this is how I have it broken down for students. I came up with this idea of ROCSS, which stands for recurring occasion, content, structure, and style. And so the recurring occasion is the social situation that keeps happening that leads to the production of a given genre. It's what genres are used for. Different kinds of writing, different genres are used in different situations to do different things. And so having students understand that, giving them a tool that they can use to analyze different kinds of writing on their own that way in contexts that they inhabit and we don't, is an important step in transfer. And so that's what this is about. It's about being able to analyze different kinds of writing, learning how to do that in the classroom, of course, and then carrying that out into the real world, into the other social spaces they inhabit. And so one way I like to think of this, just a simple statement, I think, can help students along that path. You can see if you're watching, but if you're listening, so I have in quotes and brackets, insert writers and audiences here, and then end bracket, use this genre to, open bracket, insert activities here, end bracket, close quote. And so it's, such and such audiences and such writers use this genre to do X, Y, or Z. And so, an example there is just simply a grocery receipt, which I may have mentioned on the podcast before. It's one of my favorite examples because it's simple and everybody uses them. But we keep buying groceries, and that's a recurring occasion. Grocery stores keep selling them. And in that occasion, there's a purpose for the receipt. It's to keep a record of the sale, which then could get used further by the writers, the grocery stores, or the audiences, the customers, maybe if they want to return an item or look at a store return policy or things like that. Those kinds of things are on receipts often, and so that's a genre that's used for certain activities in certain places. And the production of that genre and the particular artifacts of that genre, probably the millions or billions of them that we create every day, all come from that recurring occasion, that idea that we keep going to the store. Content is just the typical content for a given genre. Different genres have different content simply because they do different things for us. They have different purposes. Structure, there's typical structure to a lot of genres. Some are more open, some are more closed. So some, the writer has a lot of leeway, and others, the writers might not have a lot of leeway. And then style, how the writing or the speaking sounds. I also like to remind my students that we don't only use genres in writing, but we use them also every day in a spoken way. And so lots of different types of genres or types of communication. That's what ROCSS is. And like I said, we'll get into another episode where I'll talk about how I use it in the classroom. But for right now, I thought I would just give that background information because it's in the title of this episode. And so to me, genre seems important for a variety of reasons here on this next slide. One is one of my earlier sources of inspiration for teaching in terms of genre was the WPA outcome statement, where it recommends an exposure to a variety of genres, exposure to and practice with, I think, a variety of genres might be the way that they put it. And also it has become an important threshold concept about writing in the field of writing studies. If you look at the book Critical Transitions by Chris Anson and Jesse Moore, it's edited by them. I think the very first chapter, there are 5 well-known authors here in the field of writing studies who articulate threshold concepts about writing, and a lot of them have something to do with genre, and they touch on genre as an important part of writing. And so just from that, I think it's important. There's also Naming What We Know, another book also about threshold concept and genre. It has a strong presence there. The idea of genre has a strong presence there too. Another earlier one for me, some textbooks had chapters on various genres of writing. It seemed important for that reason. I've seen textbooks that have not, and over time I've opted for textbooks that do include genre as an important consideration. A writing course also can't cover all the genres that a learner might encounter. We have these first-year writing courses, and I remember, from my very first semester teaching back in 1999, promising my students that somehow what we were learning would be helpful to them. And it took me a while to kind of figure out what that might be or how that might help them, and what form that help might come in. But it does help fulfill that promise of first-year writing courses that it's going to benefit students later. And one inevitable thing is that students are going to encounter other genres later, and they will need to learn to write in those genres. Sometimes in higher education, sometimes they may write things other than just essays. And at other times they might, as they get into their career, or even if they already have a job or things like that, they will deal with different genres because they'll simply be working in different contexts. And immediately coming to mind for me is just an anecdote from a student I had, I think last fall. We had been talking about writing is made of genres and genres are made of ROCSS, and there were a bunch of other skills and strategies that I bring to the classroom to help students, to kind of support their movement between genres, like invention strategies and structural strategies, visual structure, and lots of other things, stylistic strategies. And I had a student who said, at my work, she worked at a restaurant, I helped my employer, my boss, revise our menu so that certain kinds of things stood out more, so that there was certain emphasis on different things. And one of them was fish. They were having trouble selling fish, and the restaurant owner wanted to do that. And she said, when we changed it a little bit to, just make fish a little bit more prominent on the menu, it started to sell better. And my employer was very happy about that. And so that was just something a student shared with me. And, there's no way I could have anticipated that as an instructor. And there are so many different genres out there that students might work with. We never know what they're going to do. And so having a bit of conceptual knowledge, to go back to the Elon statement on writing transfer, conceptual knowledge about genre is really important for students to have, so that they can then take that knowledge and adapt it to meet their needs in a given context. And so ROCSS is just a handy way to help them carry genre out of the classroom. Here's another example. I don't know where this came from. I looked on the document. I've got a screenshot of it here, but I also like to go and find out what my students' majors are. So I will have them create name tags, and they put their name on there. I ask them to write their major and their anticipated career on there. And I get a lot of computer science majors sometimes. And so then I go out on the internet and I ask myself, what do computer scientists write, people who are involved in computer science in some way, whether it's IT or if they're coding or if they're into cybersecurity, whatever it is they plan on doing. What kinds of things would they write? And there's a program out there at a university, and I'm sorry to say, if I can find it, I'll bring it next time. I looked through this document and I had a hard time figuring out where I got it from, but I went out on the internet and I found a document that had this table in it. It's a program in computer science. It kind of outlines all the courses. As you can see if you're watching along the top there, it gives all of the courses that they would take in this program, and then it provides a list down the left-hand side of different kinds of writing that these computer science majors would do that are anticipated by the computer science department at this university. And so they have summaries. They have pre and post. I'm not quite sure what that is. Invariants, README. A lot of us might be familiar with READMEs if you have ever worked with software. User's guide, functional specs, detailed specs, proofs, research paper, thesis. And so all of those, and then it's got a bunch of X marks where different courses in the program have one of these genres as an element. And there are some where there are lots, like a bunch of the courses have summaries in them. A bunch of them have this pre and post thing, which I need to find more out about. Invariants, the first 4 courses have some of that. READMEs, a lot of courses have that all the way across. And user's guides, it looks like there are a couple of courses that have that, maybe with one under consideration. They have some courses that are off where they offer these genres, some where some professors offer the genre as part of the course, and then there are others under consideration. But the idea is that there's this wide range of genres, and in this case, the computer science department wants its graduates to have some experience with all of those different genres. And so then that enables me to go out and do some more research, bring that into the classroom as an example. And it's good for my computer science majors, of course, and they would feel like, oh, here's something that I'm learning that's going to be a part of my future. But it's also good for students who are not computer science majors in my first year writing courses, simply because getting some variation is also a healthy thing to have when you're learning. So they might see how it works in computer science, but then eventually, I know that I've got a lot of nurses, I've got social workers, I've got people majoring in psychology, and lots of other majors, business, what have you. And I try to bring in examples of things that they might see in the future based on what it is that they're doing. And so everybody gets something that speaks to them, but then also they get to see how it works in other ways. And it just helps them become more dynamic, how they get to see how it works in other disciplines or other majors. So the other thing that I consider is, what happens when we switch contexts. We don't only switch audiences. And I think it's a really important thing to do. We get a lot of assignments, I think, in writing courses about switching audiences. How would you convey that to this audience, or how would you convey it to that audience, or make sure that you write in a way that's going to be helpful for your audience. But then sometimes it's really hard in a writing course to figure out who the audience might be, and genre can help with that as well. But we often have to switch genres. It's not just audiences we switch. If we switch our writing, we are also switching genres a lot of the times when we are switching contexts. And so just an example here, the medical field came to mind for me for this one. So I've got 4 audiences listed at the top here. I've got medical students, I've got patients, medical researchers, and the general public. And in an example that has to do with medicine, it could be the same kind of information, but it's going to come through different genres to all of these different audiences. So over here on the left, I was able to find at issuu.com, it looks like it's just a sample of a medical textbook. And so I took a screenshot of it. It's Memoryx, I think, is the publisher of the textbook, and it's an anatomy textbook. But it's got, look at all of these different pictures of the heart, emphasizing different things or showing. It's color-coded. It's got the heart from different angles, going on there, and it's very complex. A lot of information about the heart just in that one page of text, and you can imagine how thick this book probably is. But that is information that would get conveyed to medical students, and I could imagine doctors and maybe other folks in healthcare professions might keep this on their shelf. I know that my mother did. She was a nurse professionally, and I think she still has her textbooks from when she was in nursing school that she would refer to from time to time. And when I've gone to the vet, I've seen veterinarians pull out their medical texts, with whatever it was that they were looking for, just to show me. I had one actually kind of show me what the textbook was saying about my cat once. So they would get used that way. But then education materials here, the next genre over for patients this time. This is little page from some discharge papers I got. I think I took my daughter in to have her ear looked at. She had an ear infection, and when I left urgent care, they gave me this, and it's got a diagram of the ear, and it's got some basic anatomy of the ear there. Nothing like a medical text would have, I'm sure. And then it talks a little bit about the infections, and so this is very specifically for patients or parents of patients who have had taken their kids in for ear infections. The next one, medical researchers. I have a screenshot of one of the COVID studies that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. I've got just the first page of that up there, and it's one of the studies where it talks about injecting about 22,000 subjects with a vaccine. So they got the treatment with I think it was the Pfizer vaccine, if I can remember. It's too small for me to read here now. But then they had another 22,000 or so that got a placebo, and then they tracked their progress. This was, I think, before the vaccine had been approved, and it might have been one of the pieces of research that helped it get approved. But it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. So medical researchers would be looking at that, and the FDA probably, of course. And then another one, stuff about medicine, or information about medicine, I should say, comes also to the general public sometimes in the form of just articles that are written about medical studies that have come out. And this happens to me all the time. I'm browsing my social media and something comes up that's related to health, because I look at that sometimes. But here's one. This turned out to be on Yahoo. Diet soda may spike your risk of these kinds of cancer, new study finds. And I thought, that's a great thing to take into the classroom to show students. But this author here, you can see his name there, Zachary Mack. That, if you look really closely, maybe you can see. I can see it published on March 30th, 2022. It looks at the study and shares the details from the study. And so it's medicine, and all of these different genres are for different audiences and different contexts. And so just kind of switching the prose doesn't really work when you're asking a student to switch genres or to switch audiences, or to write for a different audience. You have to consider the full genre sometimes too. Also, in terms of threshold concepts, Meyer and Land, this idea of threshold concepts, I think, is really important. It's a threshold concept for writing, like I said earlier about the threshold concepts. And so just briefly about what threshold concepts are, for those who might be curious. They are defined as portals, linguistic portals, I guess, that help learners gain access to knowledge in communities of practice. So one of the things that makes a community of practice is language, that helps make, a community of practice is language. And the threshold concepts help one's understanding of the knowledge in that community of practice. And so threshold concepts are troublesome. They disrupt learners' usual ways of thinking. And, I get students all the time, I ask them at the beginning of the semester to define writing for me. They don't define writing in terms of genres. They don't say anything like that. They usually say things that have to do with ideas coming from the writer, or expressing emotions, or being able to provide evidence to prove a point. And usually it's things along those lines. Or, a lot of times we think about writing in terms of grammar. That comes up pretty quickly. Things like formatting, like APA or MLA format, can come up pretty quickly sometimes. But those are some usual ways of thinking, but thinking about writing in terms of genre can be, disruptive to the previous way of thinking. It's transformative. It changes learners' thinking and identity. I'll get more into that in just a moment. But the idea is that it provides, a depth of understanding and gives people an opportunity to identify with writing in a way that maybe they hadn't before. Once they have some experience with different genres. Like I said, we'll get into that one just a little bit. But integrative, it helps learners make connections across a wide body of knowledge. And so, once learners understand genre and how genre works, we can also provide them with lots of tools to do things like develop content or to structure writing or to think about style. And so I like to, start with genre. That becomes the very first thing we talk about on the first day of class. Then we talk about it the whole way through. And as time goes on, I add strategies. Like for structure, for example, there are different strategies that can be adapted to help learners with structure. And so that's a crucial part of genres too, is helping develop a structure that the reader can follow or that the reader expects. And lastly, threshold concepts are irreversible. So the changes in understanding become permanent. It's like they can't unsee it. And I would say that's probably true for me too, as I started to look into genre and I started to think about it more and more. That is now the way that I think about writing, the way that I think about communication. And it's something that I think is going to stick for the rest of my career. And I'm getting these two really great sources for those on this screen also. I've got Baskier and Simpson. There's an article called Reflecting on the Past, Reconstructing the Future, Faculty Members' Threshold Concepts for Teaching Writing in the Disciplines. It's in a journal called Across the Disciplines, a journal of language learning and academic writing. And I just happened to read that for something else recently. And it comes to mind for me with threshold concepts. It does a really good job with a really brief synopsis of threshold concepts and a little bit of background on them. Just really accessible, really easy for those who want that. And then also we have Meyer and Land. They are kind of the names to follow in terms of threshold concepts. They came out and defined them carefully in a book and in a couple of articles too. I've got the book here. They're editors of a book called Overcoming Barriers to Student Understanding, Threshold Concepts and Troublesome Knowledge. I really like that book because it offers a bunch of examples from other disciplines. There are chapters from people in other disciplines talking about threshold concepts for those disciplines. And if somebody from writing studies had written a chapter for that, I'm sure genre would have been a threshold concept that they would have covered. But those two sources, if you're interested in threshold concepts, which I think is important, those are two really good resources. But threshold concepts are troublesome, transformative, integrative, and irreversible. And so I really like the integrative part because once a learner understands writing that way, it kind of helps them see patterns. It helps them see a lot more than they otherwise might. And so that's an important part of expertise. Really, it helps you take writing knowledge and integrate it and see connections between lots of different things, and so lots of different strategies. So really important, I think, genre as a threshold concept. In cognitive psychology, just another, once again, I'm losing track of what I'm doing in this podcast or in this episode, but the idea is to just sort of rehearse why I think genre is so important and why it should be a centerpiece in most writing courses. But in cognitive psychology, the human brain tries to do exactly what it's told. It likes something concrete. I was thinking of that from a book by Daniel T. Willingham called, what's the name of it? I know it. It's Why Don't Students Like School? Really accessible. He does a great job with cognitive psychology and talking about how that relates to learning. And he provides, resources as well. He gives a lot of samples of research and names some research that we can do for further reading. But part of the trick that I remember from his book, I'm sorry I couldn't find the book or else I would have quoted it directly, but part of the trick for teachers is to get the mind to move back and forth between abstract representations and concrete applications. So genre really is an abstract representation of writing and how it works. And then a concrete application would be writing in a particular genre in a particular context. And so that movement back and forth can be really important for learners as well, and also can enable transfer. And so the big question is, well, what happens when genres are a central part of a curriculum? Here's one thing that I was really interested in, and I really was excited to read recently. I finally had a chance to read it, but there's Anne Ruggles-Geer's Developing Writers. It's a longitudinal study. She and her colleagues published a book with several chapters in which they did some longitudinal studies on writers, and some of the findings are really important, I think, and I'm just going to move over to that book. I've got it pulled up here on my screen, and what I'm focusing on here, I'll show you the cover. Oops, where is it? I know that I can get to the cover. Why can't I get to it? Let's see. Oh, here we go. Right up there at the top. So Developing Writers in Higher Education, a longitudinal study where Anne Ruggles-Geer is the editor, and then a lot of her colleagues here were involved in this study, and they wrote different chapters with different emphases. But they, in section 2, genre awareness contributes to student writing development. So this is a finding from this longitudinal study that I think is really important. And the chapter that I want to focus on is chapter 3, Kinds of Writing, Student Conceptions of Academic and Creative Forms of Writing Development by Lizzie Hutton and Gail Gibson. And so one of their findings here is really important. And I'll share that in just a moment. But the idea is that a lot of students kind of saw themselves as academic writers, and a lot of them saw themselves as more creative writers on the creative side. And so that was the finding that I wanted to look at. Just for the purposes of the podcast, I was going to summarize this, but then I noticed also in the next chapter, chapter 4, Ryan McCarty, the author of chapter 4 here, who talks about complicating the relationship between disciplinary expertise and writing development. He does a really great job summarizing chapter 3, and so I'm just going to go to his summary. That's what I put in here. But both of those chapters, really important ones, along with the whole study in Anne Ruggles-Geer's Developing Writers. Really great book to look at. Whoops, where's my presentation? There we go. So anyway, here's a screenshot of that. I thought, oh, this is exactly what I like to try to do with my writers if I can. So, and it also makes me think of transformative learning experiences. So to get back to threshold concepts and transformative learning, Hutton and Gibson recount that. This is Ryan McCarty just summarizing Hutton and Gibson in the Anne Ruggles-Geer text. Hutton and Gibson recount that only a few students appeared to embrace the possibility of a third approach. Once again, there's the two. There's the academic and creative frames of mind when it comes to writing. And so they found a third approach. A few students appeared to embrace the possibility of a third approach to writing as a hybrid of these two conceptions. These were students who could, as Hutton and Gibson put it, negotiate between views of writing and their writerly growth as entailing both generative activity and adherence to communicative norms, which is kind of how they had that split in their minds. These students had creative, had to do with generative, and adherence to norms. Communicative norms was more how the academic writers were thinking, instead of viewing these approaches as requiring an either-or choice. So one more time, these were students who could negotiate between views of writing and their writerly growth as entailing both generative activity and adherence to communicative norms, instead of viewing these approaches as requiring an either-or choice. In describing their experience of writing, these students looked to kinds of writing neither as repetitive practice of narrowly framed forms, nor as less structured generative strategies. Rather, they framed writing in more flexible terms as a set of understandings and abilities that could be easily transferred across various contexts and forms. In some sense, these students were able to look beyond the details of one piece of writing toward a more holistic and positive view of themselves as writers. So now they're identifying themselves as writers, and of the ways writing figured in their lives, and so they're able to apply it as well. As Hutton and Gibson note, The largest number of students who fell into this category were writing minors. And one explanation the authors offer is the minors' curricular emphasis on a wide range of genres, on reconceptualization of writing, and on considerable reflection, as described in Appendix 2. And so that to me was just a fantastic bit of news. The idea that if we focus on a range of genres, we can nudge students in this direction to help them identify as writers, and then also figuring ways to apply what they had learned into their lives. And so I'm just going to scoot back a little bit to the threshold concepts. Let's see, the transformative part of this, that it changes learners' thinking and their identity. So the way they were thinking about writing was different, and also their identity was different, and that's an important part of a threshold concept. So these students in the professional writing minor really tended to get those kinds of benefits. So I thought that was really neat. So, and it kind of validated what I had been thinking about genre. I used to just think of it, it seems like the most important thing to bring into writing classes, maybe especially first-year writing classes, as far as helping students transfer knowledge. But it also, I didn't know of any research out there to back that up necessarily at the time, and this study came along and just validated something I had been thinking. So I was really excited to see that. Let's see. Oh, another slide here, just transformative learning about thinking like members of the community of writers in this case, and identifying as writers. And so then just briefly, I think I'm about ready to wrap it up, but what do I use ROCSS for? Recurring occasion, content, structure, and style. So I use it, one, to provide an accurate framework about writing. It disrupts students' thinking, and it can change the way that students see writing. So instead of thinking about writing as grammar or APA format or any number of things, or just as something that comes from its individual expression, it's more of an accurate framework that can provide some knowledge about writing and help students make connections. It also solves a teaching problem for me. In first-year courses especially, we can't cover all the genres or contexts or audiences a learner might encounter now or in the future. And so it can cast a net across a wide body of knowledge and help them make some of those connections. And the last one there, kind of to go along with the threshold concepts, to help students view writing dynamically and holistically while also helping them identify with writing, like the writing minors in Hutton and Gibson study. And so that's what I use it for now as I think about it. And then how do I use ROCSS? I think I have an example here. Oh, yeah, I do have a few examples, which I'll elaborate on in upcoming podcasts. But how do I use ROCSS in the classroom? I repeat the class motto with them a lot. Writing is made of genres, and genres are made of ROCSS. And I don't just say it. I have them repeat it back to me. And so it's something that they become very familiar with over the course of a semester. I also analyze samples. Next thing on the slide, I also analyze samples of genres they are asked to write in for assignments, which helps with the WPA outcome statement. So in assignments in the courses that I teach, we have different genres that students will practice in, and so analyzing some of those samples is what I mean there. If they're going to write a review, then we have to read and analyze reviews, and we can use ROCSS to do that. ROCSS kind of helps ground the analysis so that it has, things that they're actually looking for. What kind of content does this genre seem to typically have? What does its purpose seem to be? What's it used for? How is it structured? And so on. And they can, across a range of examples, they can maybe come to some conclusions of that. There are some shortcomings to that, of course, which we can also talk about later. But another thing I do is that's what I just said. Analyze, this isn't the same. Analyze various samples of genres I find and bring in based on their majors, like I talked about before. I just go out there and try to find different kinds of things that they might see themselves writing in the future, bring those in so we can analyze them and they can see how they work a little bit. And then, of course, practice with lots of genres. I was inspired by Mike Palmquist's Joining the Conversation, which is a textbook. And it he spends a lot of time talking about lots of different genres, and some of them are small genres that you could bring into the classroom and work with, with students for a half hour, have them write a sample of something. Like sometimes I'll have students write a sample dictionary entry or other things like that, and just little ones that can be worked with, in the space of a class period or a partial class period can be really helpful too. And then there's something to reflect on, how did you feel as you were adapting to this new genre, something that students probably haven't written before, what did they have to do to do that well, or how well do they think they did, or things along those lines, just to get them thinking about genres and switching to different genres. So those are some of the ways that I use ROCSS in the classroom. I use it quite a bit. But I guess that wraps up this podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really do enjoy talking about genre. And, once again, I've got a few more podcast episodes coming up about this topic, because I'd like to talk more about classroom use, and so I'll provide some examples of some of the things that I've done, and so on and so forth. So we'll elaborate a little bit. I'm hoping for at least 3 episodes around genre, and maybe more if I think of more to say at this point. But thanks so much again for listening or for watching. Please feel free to like and subscribe. I'm enjoying doing these podcasts, and I wish I had time to do more of them. I'm trying to get them out as time permits, and so I do appreciate my listeners. I hope it's beneficial to you, and I will sign off for now. Thank you so much, and happy teaching.